Okay, so Mayor Pete Buttigieg is now, of course, the head of the transportation department. Can you believe that? The guy's experience is enjoying choo-choo trains, and he is the head of the transportation department after being the mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Truly an amazing rise through the governmental ranks for somebody who has no real accomplishments. So he is pushing back on the narrative that crime has gotten worse in this country under Joe Biden's tenure. He tweeted out yesterday, or X'd out yesterday, crime is down. That was about noon. I was sitting in my office settling in for lunch, and I almost spit out my food because I just happened to refresh my X page, and the first thing I see is Mayor Pete with a simple tweet that says crime is down, about 2:10 in the afternoon. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what is the play here? Are you really going to try to gaslight the American people and say, I mean, everything's great? I think some of this is tied to, obviously, the push from Donald Trump and others that, hey, illegal immigration crime is a problem. And it is, because every single crime, like the one in St. Louis on Sunday morning, is an avoidable crime if it involves somebody who is here illegally. It doesn't matter whether or not you go into the data and you insist that people who are here illegally commit less crimes. It doesn't matter, because the point is every crime committed by somebody who is here illegally is an avoidable crime because they should not have been in the country. And in St. Louis, it cost Officer David Lee his life on Sunday morning when he was hit by a drunken driver who happened to be illegal and also, by the way, had already committed crimes allegedly in this country. So I think that's where some of the pushback came from. But here's the actual data. And we know that here in Kansas City, homicides are down a little bit year over year, and that's a great trend. Now, we had a record last year, so I'm not going to sit here and do cartwheels over being down a little bit in 2024 in Kansas City. But we know the numbers are down a little bit. That's great. They're still way too high. I mean, let's not forget Mayor Lucas, when he ran for office in 2019, said that his goal was to get Kansas City under 100 homicides every year. Well, since he's been in office, in 2020, 179. In 2021, 157. In 2022, 170. In 2023, 182. And so far this year, 117. So that has not come close to happening. And by the way, 2 of those last 4 years were record-setting years in Kansas City. Is it all his fault? No. Is it largely his fault? Not really. I mean, I think he could use his bully pulpit to do a better job calling out a terrible prosecutor. Stop playing nice with her because she might share a D next to her name with you, and just admit that we've got a massive problem here when it comes to prosecution in Jackson County, and that is resulting in bad guys being back out on the streets week after week. But that's not going to happen. But here's an article that came out in the Wall Street Journal this week. Headline, contrary to media myth, U.S. urban crime rates are up. And I posted this story on my X and Facebook pages last night. They write here, left-leaning commentators and advocates have insisted over the past year that crime rates are falling. The nation's largest crime survey says otherwise. Crime rates have not been falling, writes the Wall Street Journal, and urban crime is far worse than it was pre-George Floyd. The new findings were released this month by the National Crime Victimization Survey, run by the Bureau of Justice Statistics and administered by the Census Bureau. This dates back to the Nixon administration. It's one of the largest federal surveys of any topic. So what they show here, and this is the most notable part, that crime has not risen equally across the nation. And when you exclude simple assault, the violent crime rate in 2023 was 19% higher than in 2019. The last year before the defund the police movement, the Summer of Love, swept the country in 2020. America's recent crime spike, writes the Wall Street Journal, has been concentrated in urban areas. The Wall Street Journal adds these are areas in which leftist prosecutors have gained the strongest footholds, where police have been the most heavily scrutinized, and where lax enforcement and prosecution have become common. The results aren't pretty. According to the National Crime Victimization Survey, the urban violent crime rate increased 40% from 2019 to 2023. Excluding simple assault, the urban violent crime rate rose 54% over that span. From 2022 to 23, the urban violent crime rate didn't change to a statistically significant degree. So these higher crime rates appear to be the new norm in American cities. So that's where things are at in the urban parts of our nation. There is a 26% increase in urban property crime as well since 2019. In contrast, violent crime rates in suburban and rural areas have been essentially unchanged since 2019. In suburban areas since 2019, the numbers are statistically insignificant in change. There were 22 violent victimizations per 1,000 people in 2019 compared to 23 violent victimizations per 1,000 people in 2023. In rural areas, 16 per 1,000 versus 15 per 1,000, 2019 to 2023. Statistically insignificant. But in urban areas, you have seen a 26% increase in property crime and a 54% increase in violent crime over that same 4-year window, 2019 to 2023. But the numbers are unchanged in suburban and rural areas. What does that tell you? It's the bluest districts, the bluest cities, the bluest parts of the country of which urban areas are, where you have seen over the last 4 years massive increases in violent crime. The data doesn't lie. And it is all laid out in this piece in the Wall Street Journal. It's the same thing here in the Kansas City area. I mean, where you're seeing the bulk of the homicides, the violent crime, right, is still in the places of Kansas City where the violent crime has always been a problem. It's just getting worse. Now, some of your lower level crimes, car break-ins, things like that, that's happening in other parts of town now, Brookside, Waldo, that typically have not had it. But once again, when you do not prosecute, when you're short 300 to 400 cops, these are the results. This is what happens. Now, it's not happening in Platte County. It's not happening in Clay County. It's not happening in Johnson County. Wyandotte County, KCK, has actually done a pretty darn good job. They're one of the outliers of being, a left-leaning county that's actually gotten crime under control. But guess what? You got a prosecutor there in Dupree that does his job. He's got a good relationship with Police Chief Carl Oakman, who's a friend of the show. And I don't know what their political leanings are, but it doesn't matter. They realize criminals cannot run wild on the streets. Kansas City, Missouri, Gene Peters Baker, Jackson County haven't gotten that memo yet. So for Mayor Pete to start talking about how crime is down because they're looking at maybe some national data is irrelevant. What matters is where is the crime up and why is it up? And the crime is not up over the last 4 years in suburban areas. The violent crime is not up in rural areas. The violent crime is up almost exclusively in densely populated urban areas, which are run, let's be honest, by one political party. And bought in hook, line, and sinker to one of the worst movements in modern American political history, and that was the defund the police movement. And now they're reaping what they sow. And by the way, Mayor Pete, he was part of that whole deal as well. So now he's trying to gaslight his way out of it.